Hello, and welcome back to My Time with Lynn, episode 4. I have a really special guest. I'm really excited to have this discussion. Please welcome Chance McGee. Hi, Chance.
Hey.
Okay, so first, I have a couple funny jokes to start us off, just for fun nostalgia. And we'll start off with do you remember the incident with Natalie, you and I in the bathroom at the Percival office?
Okay, where's this going? I don't remember.
Okay, all right, I'll tell the story. It's
Tell me
it's
the
a
story.
it's a
Yeah.
weird setup. Don't worry, nothing weird. Um,
You just reminded me about Natalie. I almost completely forgot. I remember her so well now. Suddenly,
yeah,
like this image of this person pops in my mind I haven't thought about for like 10 years, 15,
yeah.
20. I don't know.
No, she was amazing. She was such a great person. She was in like a conference, like a meeting in one of our little side rooms, right? And she had a view through the glass door to one of the bathrooms in her personal office. Okay, so she's in some boring meeting and she's like looking towards the bathroom. She sees me going to the bathroom, but I'm just going like to blow my nose or something. And so I don't lock the door. And the door must have just shut and you walk and like you knock on the door because you're just being polite. Um, and so like I'd been standing up, like fully clothed, right? So I just opened the door. I opened the door and I'm like, hey, what's up? Like maybe you wanted something, like it's my front door. And this is so confusing to you. And
I
you
do
just,
not remember this at all. That's so
yeah.
hilarious.
So you're, so, so you knock, I open the door, like, hey, what's up? Like I'm opening the door, like, and you're so thrown off by this. You just look around like, nothing, I guess, and you turn and walk away.
That sounds like something I would do. Like, what the hell's going
And
on?
Natalie is crying, laughing in this meeting because it's like, what is going on? It's not, one person's done and they leave. It's like my front door. Anyway, we would crack up about that all the time, just those funny little office things.
I don't remember that at all. That's hilarious,
Yeah.
man. The
Other
stuff
one.
we forgot is as funny as the stuff we remember, I'm
I
certain.
know. I know. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this. Like, there's just so many funny little
Yeah.
things. Second one, I came across this the other day. Someone reminded me of this. Is a good example. We had in Percival, we had like a Schumann, like a music abend. It was like a all music and like some people wrote some stuff. And I wrote all these poems for people. I don't know if you remember this. And I wrote one for you and I have it. And I'll read it for you because you
No
might
way.
forgot.
No way, for
Okay.
real.
Okay. So these are all little like ditty poems I wrote for everybody. Not that ditty, or like Ditty, right? But okay. Deny him any chicken wings, too hot and full of grease. For all we're really saying is give a chance a piece.
I think I remember this vaguely.
Okay.
I remember the event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I read
You
them
had one
all.
for everybody, I
I
remember.
did. I did.
And I was waiting for mine. I was like, what's he gonna say about me? And it was so not what I expected.
Yeah.
I laughed because I was like, oh, this is not what I thought it would be.
Yeah. And it was about that. I think I was teasing you for that time you ate those really hot chicken wings.
Oh, were you there when I did that?
I
That's like
wasn't. I was in the office, but I wasn't at the dinner thing, when you guys went out to get it.
that's a story.
Yeah.
That's a story
Yeah. Yeah.
that will come up most likely. Yeah.
Sure. Anyway, so you saw a couple of the episodes, you kind of get the idea, and like I'm interested in your story. We obviously spent a number of years together working on the creative team. But I wanted you on. You were one of the first people I thought of to have on a guest, because I think you were super thoughtful. You had a unique experience in the organization, and it's been some time since you were working with them. So you've had time to reflect, and being such a thoughtful person, I know you just have some interesting thoughts. So, if you could start off with like, how you came across the movement, how you end up joining, all that, if you could.
Man, first of all, thank you for having me on this thing. I think it's really important that you're doing it. And I spend about, I don't know, like if I had to put a number on it, maybe 15 minutes every day thinking about my time in the organization. And that's down from 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour.
Sure.
And there's this part of me that's like, wow, this is starting to feel further and further away. And the further away it gets, the more my memory of it starts to blur. And in the same way, like my longing for it starts to dissipate. And I realize what I long, like it kind of fits into, three categories. It's like the ideas, the people, and the culture, of the organization. And like I very much have a longing for those ideas. I very much have a longing for those people. I very much have a longing for certain aspects of the culture of the organization.
Hmm.
So it means a lot to be able to reconnect with you. And I'm glad that you're doing it, that you're the one who's, heading this up. Because you've always been like very like, the animation room, man. It was always something going on. Like people were loud, laughing, arguing, and you were like, pretty calm, kind of looking at things, and you really didn't say much until after everything settled down, and you were kind of like, that's pretty crazy what you did earlier. Yeah, that was crazy, But I could hear it when you said it. You weren't
Yeah.
saying it as part of an argument. It was always like your critiques and input and the things that you had to say always came, after the fact. And I think we're at a good point. We've been at the organization now. I don't know how long you've been out, but I've been out for about what 8 years or 10 years or something like that.
Yeah. I'm out 8. Yeah.
Yeah. So it
Hmm.
feels like, that fire has settled a lot. And so now it's easier to talk about, everything, because at this point I don't feel so close to it and
Yeah.
there's a lot of miss. So to answer your question, after this
Hmm.
very
No, that's nice. No, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Yeah.
so how did I get into the organization? That's what you asked, right?
Yeah.
Like how did I start? So I was in college in Ohio.
Hmm.
I was going to CCAD, the Columbus College of Art and Design. It was an art college. And I was like kind of confused in art school because before I went to art school, I was like, I didn't realize how fortunate I was at the time, but I had a job at a theme park drawing caricatures in Texas. And like all the people who worked there were like 10, 15 years my senior at least. And some of these guys had worked for Disney. They were like really good artists, like really good.
Hmm.
And I remember like going to get that job and I was showing them my art. And I was the best artist in my high school. I was like 15 or 16. I was like, of course I'm gonna get the job. And they looked at my work and was like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess, you seem like a nice kid and you want to do it. How about this? How about you just come and, practice and see, we'll see if you can. Like, what do you mean you'll see? I'm so good. And, I get there and I'm drawing lines and I suck at it. And I'm like, oh wow, I really suck. And I'm looking at these people draw. I was like, oh, I'm really bad. And that I had that feeling even after I got the job. I was working. I had that feeling of sucking, just being terrible. Being next to people who were like so much better than me. But I realized in those like year and a half, 2 years I was working at that job, I learned a whole lot. And when I went to art school, I was like much further ahead than my colleagues when it came to just like understanding basics about, art. And I realized that most of my colleagues were like me in high school, like the best art, school kid, or they had rich parents and, oh, I want to do a painting, some, abstract piece that represents my suffering as a 12-year-old, girl. It's like, what do you know? You don't, it's like, stop, like there's nothing, you haven't lived, like, so I remember being in art school and being confused because I thought art school was going to be like my job. I would be around all these really amazing artists, but instead I was around a lot of like posers, people who just wanted to be an artist, but they didn't, want to actually be one, do the
Sure.
things that's required to be one.
Sure.
So I didn't do so well in art school. I spent a lot of time playing video games. And then I got kicked out after my second year
Okay.
because I was there on a scholarship. I had
Yeah.
like a pretty much a full scholarship because of
Hmm.
my stuff that I sent them. I didn't know this, but your GPA has to be pretty high if you want to keep your scholarship.
Yeah.
And my GPA went below 3.0, which I thought was, high school, 3.0 is pretty good. I was doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, that's not good enough to keep your scholarship.
Right.
So
Right.
it was like, oh, wait a minute. You didn't tell me that. It's like, yeah, it's in the fine print. I missed that. So I lost my scholarship and I took a year off to basically see if I wanted to go back and pay for it myself.
Yeah.
And they said, some other, technical stuff I'm not going to get into.
Sure.
And I took a semester in philosophy at a community college.
Okay.
And that's when I came across the organization. I
Mm.
was at a community college. Um, well, it wasn't at the college campus. It was a friend of mine who still went to the art school. We got together to talk, and I was always kind of into philosophy, having like deep conversations about stuff. And we were at a coffee shop, two of my friends and myself, and we were having some like debate about, I can't remember what it was about, but it was something like esoteric, like if God is good, like how can you claim that God is, good if he's the creator of everything? He also
Sure,
creates evil. He creates genocide. So
sure.
that would also mean that God is bad too. And my friend was like, no, but God doesn't create that. We create that. And so we had this big debate, and my other friend was just, laughing because we're just, talking about it. I
Yeah.
remember there was this guy like sitting next to us. I'll never forget him. I want to say his name. I don't know if
You
I
can
should.
say his name.
His name was I think it was Noel Moise.
Okay, yeah.
Um, do you remember him? Or
Sort vaguely.
okay, I
Yeah.
think he's like from Barbados or something like that. Like
Yeah.
where's Rihanna from?
Rihanna?
Rihanna, the singer. I think he's from that place, wherever she's from.
Bahamas, I think.
Bahamas. Okay,
I
yeah.
think, yeah, yeah. But the Caribbean, sure. Yeah.
The Caribbean. Anyway,
Yeah.
I remember like he was there and he kept like laughing. Like
Mhm.
at our discussion, like he was like he was like laughing and chuckling. I looked at him a few times and he didn't look at us. He was just like laughing and nodding his head. So we were having this big debate. And at some point I looked at him and I was like, what do you think? What do you think? And he was like, have you heard of Lyndon LaRouche? And then I swear to God, the next hour was the most interesting discussion I've ever had. It was
Yeah,
mostly just me listening to this guy, like, who the hell? He's talking about Leonardo da Vinci and nuclear power and going to Mars and classical music and economics and all types of stuff I just never, ever really thought about in the same context that we were discussing philosophy, the good in.
yeah.
So we stayed in touch, and then over a bit of time, some other people came out to meet up with me, and I was like smoking a lot of weed and playing the guitar and drawing.
Sure.
Didn't know what the hell I was doing in my life, and
Sure.
so that was the context in which I met the organization. And shortly after, having a bunch of arguments with some friends of mine about being political, and a lot of my friends were very hostile towards some of the ideas of the organization, which I didn't understand
Hmm.
at that time. It took me a while to figure out why, but I didn't
Hmm.
know it at that time. And I just remember having a lot of arguments with my friends and just thinking to myself, like, man, I don't know who my friends are anymore. Because when I try to bring up certain ideas to them, like they become really hostile, like nuclear power or global warming, like all these topics we would, talk about in a very different context in the organization. I
Sure.
couldn't even discuss them. I wasn't trying to make a stance. It was just immediately they would have this
Foreboding.
hostile, like, these things aren't good, and
Yeah.
so I started to feel isolated from my friends, and I was spending more time with the organization, talking to them. And the guy who was talking to me to most at that time was a guy by the name of Steve Jeffrey.
Okay.
And I never met anybody like him. He was just super cool, like loose,
He's an
like
awesome dude. Steve is such a great
he's,
guy.
you knew him,
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
To
I
this day.
not a lot, but every interaction, man, this guy is just a great dude. And like the organization was filled with just these great people, you know? Like they're enough to, I think, like convince a lot of people like, oh, like I could work with this dude. Like there were some people that weren't as good, of course. It's a big group of people, but yeah, people like Steve Jobs, like, man, this guy's just a great guy.
I just remember just being like amazed. Like every time I talk to this guy, he's so humble.
Hmm.
But he was so intelligent. Like he was so much more intelligent
Sure, super
than
smart.
like
Yeah.
everybody I knew. But he was so humble.
Hmm.
And I would hear him talk to people, and they were like, "Hey, that's stupid." He's like, "Ah, yeah, maybe you're right. I don't know. Who am I?" And I was like, "No, that guy's stupid. Like, what do you mean? Maybe you're right. Like, don't do that, Steve. I know who you are. Like, we were just reading Schiller the other day. You were showing me principles of geometry. Like, don't say maybe you're right. And I remember having
Yeah,
that feeling, like, stop it.
sure, sure. That's hilarious.
So, but yeah, I just remember, spending a lot of time with Steve,
Hmm.
and like I said, it's ideas, people, and culture. The ideas were what we spent most of the time talking about. It was mostly Schiller. We were working on Schiller's lecture on universal history a lot, and
Hmm.
that had a very profound effect on me. Um, And then I remember one day he gave me a flash, thumb drive, which had all of Martin Luther King's speeches on it,
Oh wow.
all of them. And at that point, the most I've ever listened to was maybe like some highlights from his, famous "I Have a Dream" speech.
Sure.
I've never actually listened to a Martin Luther King speech, and I remember just thinking to myself, like, oh, he likes, he knows about this stuff, like he appreciates it, but like he really understood it. And I remember listening. I was um I was doing some drawing or something at my apartment, and I was listening to his mountaintop.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
his mountaintop speech,
Yep.
the last one he did right before he got assassinated.
Hmm.
And I remember towards the end of it, I was in tears.
Yeah.
I was in tears, man. And at that point, I kept referencing back to, Schiller, his concept of the philosophical mind versus the
Hmm.
bread-fed scholar.
Sure.
Like,
Hmm.
and then listening to King, I was like, this is someone who's inspiring people to be philosophical minds. Like we're all philosophical minds until we decide to pursue it. And this is, what it looks like to live a life pursuing it. So I just remember being profoundly moved by it. Shortly
Hmm.
after I joined, all my friends were like, bro, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm just gonna, see what it's like.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I got a U-Haul,
Yeah.
all my stuff being moved. I gave away like video games to my friends. I thought I were committing suicide. They were like, "What's up with Chance?" Like he gave me like all his art books, and it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Now,
um,
a couple plugs real quick just for our audience that doesn't really know about this stuff, but like Friedrich Schiller is super underrated philosopher and thinker, not given the credit in philosophy schools that he deserves or art schools, I think too. But then Dr. King, I mean, yeah, his writings, his speeches are some of the best philosophy and theology you're going to get. I mean, the mountaintop speech is just so phenomenal and moving. Everyone should listen to it just to see who he was. And often what you get in the media is just such a truncated, reduced version of him, like a soundbite version of him. And it is interesting back in the day when after King died and the civil rights movement slowly broke into two big sides, and one side really worked with our organization. To their credit, I think there was some good stuff we were doing on like legitimate civil rights and legitimate advancement of all people. And there was the other side that was like the what's his name? I forget his
Jesse
name.
Jackson.
Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and more like
Al Sharpton.
the sort of, I don't know, more political, but I don't know. I think the not as good version. But
No, I mean
anyway,
they weren't focused on policy. They were
yeah,
focused on pointing out problems and like,
sure,
But yeah, you're right. It was a different. King was about policy. Like, how do we
yeah,
create policy? Like he was like Lynn. Lynn was policy oriented.
yeah,
Policy oriented. Yeah.
yeah. But sorry, just a little background. But yeah, that's okay. So then you're working in the Detroit office, is where you started? Is that right?
Yeah, so the Detroit office was going to Ohio. Joanne talked a little bit about this, which I didn't know the backstory, and I was like, oh, that's how this started. Like
Yeah,
that's when
yeah,
I met them. They were like, every time I saw Joanne, she was just like, she just looked tired. It's like, oh, now I know why. Now I know why. And Brian
yeah,
was always like goofy. Like Brian was really like. It was after I joined that I met Brian.
yeah.
Steve had left shortly
Oh
after I
yeah,
joined.
yeah,
And I remember that was the first time like I had been in the organization for maybe a month or two, and I was still in contact with a few of my friends, and they were always like, "When are you coming back? Like, how long are you gonna stay?" And I was like, "No, I got to figure this out. Politics. And I'm talking about stuff they didn't
yeah.
understand." And Steve left,
Hmm.
and that to me was like, "Wait, something's wrong," because nobody told me because he had left like a while ago. I found out about it accidentally from somebody who mentioned it to me, and they thought I already knew. I forgot. I think maybe Ben Tatro
Okay,
was
sure.
there.
Ben, yeah,
That was my roll dog, man. And
yeah,
I'm talking to you, Spencer. So
yeah, yeah,
I don't have a general audience in mind. I'm just talking to my friend Spencer
yeah.
here.
Of
So
course, dude. Yeah.
um and he mentioned it to me like in passing. He was talking about something. He was like, yeah, we have to do this and things are getting hard. We having difficulty raising money. Steve just left, and got to get the car repaired. I was like, wait, Steve left? He's like, yeah, he left like maybe a month ago. You don't know? I was like, what? And I remember being pissed, like, why didn't nobody tell me?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Summer was in the office at that point. Summer had
Mm,
come to like help, because it was like some kind of crisis. I didn't know about it. I was a new member,
sure,
but the Detroit office had some kind of like crisis apparently.
sure.
like a few people had left, and I remember just coming up to Summer. I was like, Summer, what's going on? Like, did Steve leave? And Summer was like, oh, who told you? Okay, actually, yeah, yeah, he left. But you know what? Can we sit down? Can we? I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, no, why are people not telling me stuff?
Yeah,
Like,
sure,
so
sure.
I had this weird feeling. And shortly after I found that out, Brian came around.
Uh-huh.
So, Detroit was tough, man. It was a tough deployment. I didn't really like Detroit. We did a lot of good music work there.
Uh-huh.
Um, and Steve was kind of like the person who encouraged me to keep doing art
Hmm.
because a lot of people in the office, and I won't say their names, but they were of the opinion that if you're a new member, you should be working on, going out and organizing. You should be reading the briefings. You should be
Sure,
doing all this stuff to, looking at Lynn's triple curve, and you got to catch up, and you're
sure.
not doing that work because every time you get from a deployment, you go in your room and you paint for 2 hours.
Yeah,
Like, excuse me, we have work to do. And I remember hearing that tone a lot from people, and I was like, well, I'm an artist, and I talk about art all the time with Steve, and he was like, I would join because of art, like
sure.
I want to do art, and I thought we would do more art here. Like, what's the big deal?
What a great
Um,
like can I just say for our audience,
please,
like
please, yeah,
what is I mean, I come across this time and time again, this orthodox like hardline views, like no, this is what we're supposed to be doing, yada yada. To like zoom out and like for an audience that doesn't know, Chance Chance's contributions to the organization in the realm of art are like no one like holds a candle to them. Like what you were able to do. And we'll talk about the personal stuff whenever, but it's just such a like looking with hindsight, right? Perfect hindsight, such a ridiculously dumb view. Like, no, no, we
it
know
was
we don't want you to develop this. Like the things you were able to do, um, with our team and everything, but like in the realm of art, in the realm of just communication of ideas and beauty, like to go back in time and like, no, no, read this briefing. Like it's just such a stupid idea. Like you see it's if you're a hardliner and you're orthodox, you probably are just moronic. You probably don't know what you're doing. You should not have any power. No, it's we got to do this thing. It's like you don't even believe that. You just think someone else believes that, and you're telling me this thing, right? So
right.
that's great. It's crazy, but also emblematic of some of the problems they had. So that's hilarious though. But that's so yeah,
And to be fair, most of the stuff I had in my sketch pads were like drawings of like comic book characters and like
sure,
caricatures of people. It was like the opposite of what we talked about in the
sure,
organization when we talked about classical art. And I loved classical art. I genuinely did,
yeah,
but it wasn't what I was aspiring towards. I
sure,
was aspiring towards storytelling in the form of comic book. That's what I was aspiring towards.
sure.
And then animation was kind of like a side aspiration of mine.
Hmm.
And so I felt like, well, maybe I should focus more on classical. So I started doing paintings, like classical paintings, and I was trying to understand it. I wasn't very good at it, because I just, never worked.
Sure,
But I thought like an artist, if I put time into it, I'll get better at it. What's the big deal? Like, let me figure this stuff out. We got brochures on Fidelio, articles about, divine proportion from Da Vinci. I'd like to figure this stuff out and see if I can recreate it. So I
sure.
remember as a new member, there were always like these interventions. We have to make an intervention, Chance.
Yep,
Like
yep,
you're gonna make an intervention, right? You remember
yep.
that?
Oh yeah.
Um, and like most of the interventions were centered around that, like me putting too much time like working on art,
Hmm.
um, and not focusing on the organizing and reading the briefings because my organizing as a new member was pretty crappy. I was
Sure.
like, "Do you believe in truth? Let me tell you, truth is like this thing that it's like this thing behind a door." And if you put your finger through the door, and I'm like trying to like, what are you talking? You didn't even read that. Like you have to actually read what Lynn was saying before you try to talk to people about it. And then to their that's what I'm saying. I give them a
Yeah,
little bit of
yeah.
credit because
Sure,
I really sucked at organizing because I wasn't actually trying to be an organizer. I was trying to be an artist.
sure.
Um,
But yours is an interesting case study, I think, because I think to the organization's credit, it was a good example of, especially when you moved to Percival, of like highlighting someone's talents and then putting them in a position where you really could make a significant contribution. You know what I mean? Like I mean, all of us in Percival are kind of similar, more the artistic side. And I'm thinking, like Diana and Chris and all those people, but like just, sure, field organizing is one thing, but also we have this specific kind of deployment going on where we need people that are capable of being a little more creative in the realm of communication and art and all that. So, and I think it was good, initially when you came out there. So,
Yeah, so then if we fast forward,
I mean,
eventually, maybe like 4 or 5 months after me joining, I had kind of stopped doing art just because I was burned out from like having to like have these interventions all the time and argue with people.
sure.
I wasn't doing so well. Like I started like gaining a lot of weight. Like
Mhm.
we had these like 7 day long deployments to like the state house in Chicago in like winter. And I just remember just being in freezing in the cold, with like
Yeah, yeah,
leaflets. Like, what
yeah,
the fuck am I doing? Like literally, like what am I doing here?
right.
And so I kind of like I lost my fire a little bit. I remember feeling like, I need to figure out how to organize. I need to figure out how to communicate ideas because some of these people were really good organizers. And I would stand next to them and Scott Mooney,
Sure.
amazing, amazing organizer.
Yeah.
Amazing. Whenever I was standing next to that guy, I was like, I wish I could do that, like he's able to talk to people like he knows them, but he's able to lift them up and show them what they don't know. And whenever I tried to show people what they don't know, it's like I was making them feel stupid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that. Like
Sure.
how like he makes people, he's lifting them up, and I love that. And I was like, I want to figure this out. I actually did want to figure it out. I just
Hmm.
wasn't very good at it.
Sure.
Um, and then Lynn started talking about Alice in Wonderland.
Yep. Yep. Right.
Fucking Alice in Wonderland, right?
Alice in Wonderland. Yep.
Um, and Lynn had this whole thing at some point. I remember um everybody was confused what the hell he was talking about
Hmm.
because he spent so much time talking about humor, but it sound and whenever Lynn tried to make a joke, like it never was funny. I just remember that. Like it was like, you gotta understand humor. It's like the little girl who's walking down the dark alley and the guy comes up behind her and says, "Hello." Yeah, you gotta understand humor. It's like that's not funny, Lynn. Like that's actually not funny. That's just weird.
I know. There was a disconnect on some of that for sure.
But he had an idea. Like he did understand the necessity for humor dealing with the political situation as crazy as it was.
Sure.
And but he said this has to be animated. We need an animation team. We need to tell this story. We need to do something for like children. It needs to have like a. And I remember at that point there was this subtle shift where everybody in the office suddenly was like looking at me a little bit more like, did you hear what Lynn said? The same people who were like, don't, you shouldn't be spending. It's like, hey, did you hear what Lynn said? Did,
Hey,
did you hear that?
it's
Chance, did you hear
it's approved now.
that?
We can support you because it's
Yeah.
approved. I know. It previously was in a box and we didn't know what to do with it, so we just shamed you for it. Now it's
Yeah.
approved, so like, hey, you're our star. Is that such a funny flip? Yeah, that's so funny. Okay, so
So
the
that
yeah.
that that whole thing was kind of for me like it proved to me that my inclination to pursue art was right.
Hmm.
But it wasn't that simple. It also proved to me the value in being able to communicate ideas. Because I was out there organizing as much as I was able to see people like really like I mean like having profound conversations about some of the highest ideas that we as a species have been able to articulate with language, and
Hmm.
they were able to talk about this in front of a book table at a post office, and
Hmm.
people would understand it. And I just remember thinking, wow, I'd like to be able to do that. So I did some drawings, some Alice in Wonderland drawings.
Yeah.
Somehow it got to Lynn. I forgot how. And Lynn like went off on it. Like he had a whole thing, like a whole NEC was like, this is it. This is what we have to do. And he was like pointing to it.
Yeah.
And then like not that long after, they told me you should go out to Percival and work with
Yeah.
the team on this animation.
Hmm.
And at that time, I just thought I was going to work on the animation, then I'd go back and do organizing.
Sure.
And Percival was like a whole thing,
Yep.
man. That
Yeah.
was like I never experienced anything like that. It was like a combination of like this elite, structure. Like some of the like, I remember like Delonte was there, and I remember seeing Delonte once,
Hmm.
and I don't know what it was about him, but like every time he said something, it sounded like he just really understood like how important it was.
Sure.
And I was like, yeah, this makes sense, And I remember
Hmm.
like Leandra was there,
Yeah.
and she was like really shy, but she was funny. I remember every time she started talking,
She's
she had this
hilarious.
look on her face like she was trying not to laugh, but she was like funny.
Yeah.
Um,
Brilliant and hilarious.
okay, hold on, let me rephrase this. Then there's two other people. I already said one of them.
I'll cut it out. It's fine.
Let me take this out. Okay, there's two other people. Okay, and they don't quite fit into like the whole thing that I imagined. It was more like this kind of like bro culture type of thing,
Okay.
and like I felt like I like those were the guys who were like, "You're working with us, okay? Like you're working with us."
Yeah.
And there was one other guy who got in the middle of it, um, and I really don't want to say his name. Now we can talk about it after.
Sure.
And he was like, "Well, let me work with him too because I think we can do something good." And so the four of us kind of like went inside of a room and kind of like pushed everybody out. It was like, "No, stop asking about it. We're gonna get it done when it's done."
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it just became me and this other guy,
Hmm.
um, whose name I will probably tell you in the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and we did something pretty cool because he was
Hmm.
smart. And neither of us knew how to animate, but he was really smart. I knew how to draw, and we figured it out. We got some computers that just bought all types of stuff. I remember just feeling like, what the hell is going on? They buying computers for us and
Yeah.
programs and software and stuff I just wish I had when I was in art school, but I couldn't afford it. And
Hmm.
we figured it out, and we made this little animation, and Lynn loved it. And I don't know where it is. It
The
doesn't
tra
exist anywhere.
the trailer one.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
George Soros, with
Yeah.
the caterpillar and
The trailer was like, man, this is gonna be the greatest animation series of all time.
yeah.
It's like this is so cool.
It
Yeah.
was fun. Like it was
Hmm.
just a lot of fun. It was just like two dudes in a room and like just trying to figure stuff out. What do we
Hmm.
do this and do that? And it was like we just had this like we were working very close together,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we people respected it. Like let them work, let them work, let them do what they have to do. Lynn loved it,
Hmm.
and Lynn said we got to do another one. And then a lot more people wanted to get involved in it. Like
Yep.
everybody had like ideas they wanted to contribute. Everybody was like,
Yep.
"Well, how about you do this and do that?" And then it just stopped being what it was. It started turning into this like, well, Lynn said this. I had a meeting with Lynn, and Lynn told us to do this, and I just
Bringing it.
remember feeling like, what is going on? Like, this is so weird. Like, this isn't what we did in the first one. Like, it's
I know, bringing the orthodox like hardliner or just the people that don't have a sense of art into this creative project when it's in its infancy. Yeah, I remember feeling bad. Like I think because I think I'd been there before and then I left and like I'd wanted to work on it, but like for our audience, like so we have our field offices or almost all the offices are just field and we're going out in the field, we're talking to people, whatever, street corners, post offices, campuses for colleges, whatever, just trying to talk to people, meeting them, etc. And then we have like our DC office, which is more like politically focused, right? Working with the Senate and embassies and think tanks. And then our Percival office was like our national headquarters for the youth movement. And that's where we did like we ran the website, we ran our studio to do like we had at a certain point we had like a couple shows every day, like TV shows, and then a couple larger like webcasts and discussions throughout the week. So we had a whole studio doing that too. And then we had more of the creative stuff as well, which was film productions, documentary productions, animation studios, graphics. For a while we made like unified signs for our field teams because we are trying to like improve that quality of things because it was a shit show for a while. It was just whatever we want. Just have
it was
someone
the
throw in like
craziest, man.
100 pictures anyway.
With
So
12 different fonts on
I
one
know
side. Like, what are
half
you
of it
doing?
half
Like,
of them are Comic Sans and Papyrus.
Pirates, Comic Sans, stop.
It's really hard hitting. Uh, Anyway, so yeah, okay, so you came over relatively quickly from the Detroit office to Percival, and then
I think I've been in less than a year
yeah, that's
before I
wild.
got transferred. So, like, I never, I was always a new member in Percival. I stopped being a new member after a while, but like, I kind of joined, in Percival. And
Right.
to me, I felt like I was in the trenches. Organizing really felt like the trenches. I
Sure.
hated it, but at
Hmm.
the same time, I thought it was amazing that people could communicate ideas. So there was something like I had this admiration for it, but I just hated it. It was like I'm not good at this.
Sure.
Like I feel like I'm getting better, but it
Hmm.
reminded me of that same feeling I had when I was working, as a caricature artist. Like I'm around these people who are way better than me. Only difference is it's not something I really, really wanted to do. It's just something I felt like I was being told to do because it was
Sure.
important.
Sure.
Percival was different. Percival was
Hmm.
different. It was it
Hmm.
was a it was an operation that was for the most part being determined by the people who were there
Yeah.
on a creative level.
Hmm.
And I had never been in an environment like that before,
Hmm.
where I'm around all these people who are like me, my age, from different parts of America mostly.
Hmm.
Um, Basically figuring out how to run campaigns in a creative way. Like, how do we make videos? How do we, write short articles and make little cartoon strips and,
Hmm.
write little pieces of music. And it was just this really creative environment. And we had this section, this section that we worked in, you and I,
Yeah.
Spencer,
Hmm.
called the animation room.
Hmm.
And that's where like most of the actual production of like the animation stuff or the
Yeah.
illustrations or the video editing or sound. We had Dennis. I,
Yeah.
I love Dennis Mason. I
Hmm.
tried to reach out to him so many times. I love that dude, man. He was
Yeah.
like one of the few people when I was around. I felt like I don't know. I felt like I wasn't in the organization when I was around him.
Sure. Sure.
He was just a real like chill, like And I remember this time. Sorry,
No.
sorry. I remember this time. Merv used to do these hikes. You remember?
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
would organize these hikes, and we'd all go
Yeah.
on these hikes. I loved it, man. Um, and we were on this hike, and Dennis and I, for some reason, we like went off in a different direction. And we got up to this cliff. We were like looking off at the top of the cliff. We could see all these mountains. It was this beautiful scene.
Hmm.
And I remember just standing next to him, like, wow, this is beautiful. And we were looking in silence. And he looked at me like really slow. And he's like, hey, I said, what's up? He's like, did you hear that? I was like, what? And then he farted. I almost fell off the damn cliff. I almost fell off the cliff laughing so hard. And that was Dennis. Like, that was Dennis, like, he
Sure.
didn't. I love that about him. So it was hilarious.
That's pretty funny.
Um, that's such a non sequitur tangent to everything we
Sure.
were talking about. But
Yeah. Well,
what
the
I was trying to say
yeah.
is Percival was a unique operation that was run by young people on a creative level. And
Hmm.
we didn't always agree. We were arguing. But for the most part, we were all trying to make it work. We were trying
Hmm.
to, find solutions.
Hmm.
But like any, structure where you have, you know, a lot of different minds gathered in the same room with different, backgrounds and different opinions about the world and how things should be done, things had a tendency to divide into little groups.
Hmm.
You would have the group who thought this way, who worked in that room, and the group who thought this way and worked in that room.
Yeah.
And what I thought was cool is like we were a group, the animation room, but I felt like we were like the most diverse, like we had the
Hell
most
yeah.
diversity of like opinions in that room.
Hmm.
And it was almost like a safe haven for ideas. So whatever group you were in, if you came in the animation room, you could like figure out how to like take your idea further, and we would
Yeah.
work on it. We wouldn't agree with you on certain things, but we would make it work and shit got done there. And
Hmm.
it was a fun place to be. Some of the best memories I have in my life are in that room with
Same.
those people, with those
Yeah.
people.
It was, it was a magical room. Obviously not the room itself, the people, but like it's almost like how you're describing Steve Jeffries. You're like, man, this is like this dude's awesome. That was kind of how I think a lot of people felt about our team in there. They're like, man, I want to be around them. Like they're like everything is happening, everything like substantial, longer term is happening in this room. It was such a diverse group. We all had our own skills. It was like I don't know, like the Avengers or some RPG where you just have this amazing team, like all
Yeah.
different skill sets. I remember thinking like, man, why am I here? Like I don't know what I'm bringing to the table. These people are just amazing. And I'm like, sure, let's do some films. Like, like let's talk about philosophy. No, but it really was. We disagreed. We fought about stuff. But it was always like this loving, like, how do we figure it out? And just the things we made. And we just pulled off miracles. It seems like we pulled off miracles every day, you know? Like this thing needs to get done. What it's always like it's always it's always a crisis. You know, it's always like we need this thing.
Crisis.
You were like sleeping under the desk sometimes and
Oh shit, I
it
did. I did do that a few times. Yeah, I
yeah,
remember. I
you
forgot.
know, or like, we're having to wait like hours for some video to render. We're like, oh, we gotta come back and all the technical challenges, but it was beautiful. I agree. It was also some of my favorite memories of my life, doing that kind of work because it just almost the pinnacle. You know, these young people, we had we had ideals. We were idealistic. You know, we had like goals. We were on the same kind of mission. We were like helping each other develop skill sets. We're like trying to push each other to be better people. You know, and it really was like this golden moment in a sense, I think.
Yeah, the animation room kept expanding. Like people would like join. Like
Hmm.
at one, I think it was initially just like myself, um, Yavitz.
Hmm.
I left a long pause in case you want to cut that out. I don't know what
Sure.
his stance is. Um, Brent. I think it was just three of us at first.
Yeah.
Just three of us, and then at some point, Diana came,
Hmm.
which was like a very necessary like balance of like the energy. It was like too masculine.
Sure.
Like it
Sure.
was bro energy. I didn't, I felt like I was drowning in it a lot.
Sure.
And so she balanced it like in a really necessary way.
Yeah.
Um, and then I want to say you came. Who was there when you came?
I forget. I think you all were
Anyway,
there before me. Yeah.
and then you came, and that was also like another balance because you were like a very neutral. Like you had this like, when I say neutral, I don't mean like, I mean like powerful neutrality. Like you
Sure.
need a powerful neutralizer, like
Sure.
a base to come back to. And without you, it was like boop 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 bouncing off the walls all
It
over the
was it
place.
was a lot of that. Yeah.
It was crazy, man. So it was you on one side, and then Merv came on the other side. I felt like the two of you were like the anchors,
Sure. Yeah.
and it kind of like prevented things from getting too wild, too crazy. Kind of like,
Yeah.
you
Sure.
know,
Like, oh, let's focus, guys. Let's get back to this.
yeah, it was necessary. It's so necessary.
Hmm.
And then you had people who kind of orbited, like Hector would orbit around it. He kind
Hmm.
of made a little spot there after a while. Um, Matt Ogden would orbit around it. He would come in and I spent a lot of time there. He's one
Hmm.
of the most creative people I ever worked with. That dude,
Sure.
like, I remember being surprised because he always kind of came off as like naive in a certain kind of way. And it
Hmm.
took me a long time to realize that like he's putting a lot of energy into appearing that way. He's like super competent, like super competent.
Sure.
And I would see him like do things that I would try to like show other people how to do in terms of like, how to like blur edges in Photoshop. Like some people
Sure.
would have like meltdowns, just using the brush tool. Like, I can't do this. Like, I don't know how to, it's like, just click the thing. Like, I'm just telling you to, it's not that, no, I'm not an artist. I don't do art. Like, can you do it? Like, all right, So you're
Sure.
like dealing with that a lot. Like, but he didn't have those like inhibitions.
Sure. He could learn
It's really
anything.
cool to,
He could learn anything. And
could.
I think it was just not to say naive, but maybe like he just had this curiosity and like you're like he could figure out anything. So he was always really impressive, you know. I really
it
really
was it was childlike. That's what it was.
sure. Yeah.
He maintained the curiosity and innocence of a child
Hmm.
while having the immense like mental capabilities of like a genius or like some like adult who's like super competent. Like he was able to maintain both.
Sure.
And I didn't understand that about him at first. And I remember the more I worked with him, the more I really appreciated having him around.
Yeah.
Um,
He
and then
was
there
a
was
he was an anchor for that whole office overall, I
he
think.
was
Yeah.
he was
Hmm.
and you really need people like that who can go into any environment and kind of anchor themselves and sort of anchor the energy of the room in a certain kind of way.
Hmm.
So you really need people like that. And then Joanne came at some point
Hmm.
um, after Brian, who there's a whole story of Brian, man, which I feel like I need to get into that, but I'm a little concerned about the nature of the story because it is popping all over the place. So
No, it's okay. Why don't you talk about Brian?
so like I told you, when I was a new member, Brian was the one who kind of, anchored me a little bit more after, Steve left and there was this period of uncertainty, people telling me to, stop focusing on art. Brian was also an artist
Hmm.
and
Very talented.
very talented artist.
Hmm.
And it was weird because like he had been in the organization much longer than me. He was a really good organizer. I would always learn from him. He understood ideas, but he was also like very playful, He was
Yeah,
very playful. He would joke about stuff. And he had a humility to him, which I felt like that's one of the things that I, let me see how to say this. There was a tendency in our organization to become cynical, actually, and judgmental towards others.
sure.
And I would often fall victim to that. I would see it happen to people when you're organizing, and a lot of people are walking past you, calling you an idiot. Like that feeling I had when my friends would, tell Steve, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Steve, like, oh, maybe you're right. I'm like,
Yeah, yeah,
that guy's an idiot. That's kind of like the energy I would have. And it's fine to have a little bit of that, but when you're at a book table trying to double the line and talking about the need for Glass-Steagall, a lot of people are just going to be like, well, that's stupid. And if your energy is always, oh, that guy's an idiot, that guy's an idiot, like after a while, that becomes like almost like a default key that you play in.
sure.
You would go into the field, what we called it, the organizing,
Hmm.
with this energy of that guy's an idiot, that guy's an idiot, which on the surface created this kind of arrogance. And I remember feeling that, like in myself. I felt it in myself after a while, and I
Hmm.
didn't like it. And I
Yep.
remember I started eating meat around
Okay.
that time. I was a vegan when I
So
joined the
yeah,
organization.
that's right. Forgot about that. Yeah.
I had these like I would have so many arguments. People were always making interventions. He's a vegan. He wants to paint. Like, like
I know. We
what's up
could.
with this guy? Like,
No one could tolerate that you're a vegan. Like it's a big thing they got to focus their energy on. No, we have to have a talk.
And so I remember like there was this shift. I started eating meat. I broke my vegan diet at KFC with Ben Tatro.
Okay.
Got some fried chicken at KFC with Ben Tatro.
Sounds like a
And I
Tatro
remember
kind of thing.
eating it and thinking about, Ben was like so happy, and I was just like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like it really felt like killing some version of me. I felt like I was eating
Sure.
a dead thing.
Sure.
Um, but I remember after that, it was kind of like I I stopped fighting as much. I kind of like gave up easier when people would make
Sure.
interventions. Like, okay, okay, all right, I won't paint. I'll stop
Sure.
painting. Or okay, okay, I won't be a vegan. Okay, you just kind of like giving up more and more yourself. And I noticed with my friends, like when I talked to them, they couldn't recognize me anymore
Yeah.
because I had this arrogance a lot when I would talk to them.
Sure.
Like, what? I don't. Why are you like? You eat meat now? It's like, yeah, man, you don't know. Like, I became kind of arrogant. I remember that
Sure.
feeling. Um, and that was something that existed. And
Hmm.
it's not like the organization made that arrogance. It's obviously a trait of me. It exists within me.
Hmm.
But the arrogance that came out in the organization was always this sense of like you're stupid because you don't know how to double the line, or you're stupid because you don't understand the nature of geopolitics and the origin of the British Empire. It's like
Sure.
there was suddenly this reason to justify the arrogance. And as much as I appreciated Lyndon LaRouche, I think he might have been the most arrogant of all. And I think that's kind of where a lot of that came from.
Okay.
And maybe he had a good reason for it.
Hmm.
And I'm not here to poop on that guy's legacy and everything he represented because he was a genius, and I really genuinely enjoyed being around him and talking to him.
Yeah.
But he was arrogant. He
Sure.
was very arrogant. And he would
Hmm.
say it. If you're talking to somebody and they don't, you just ask them, "What are you, some kind of idiot?" Like he would make jokes about, "What are you, some kind of idiot?" You're just kind of, and that was, it felt like a disease. It felt like a poison that we
Sure.
all kind of we kind of drank it. And some people didn't do it as much, or they
Hmm.
they found a way to like protect themselves from it.
Yeah.
And whenever I saw people like that, I was attracted to them. You were one of
Hmm.
those people. I felt like
Thanks.
you didn't have that at all, like none of it.
Thank you.
Which is why I was always kind of like, I was happy you came in the office. I was happy you were around because that was something that happened. And I think what I'm trying to say in a very long-winded way is when you have a lot of people working on ideas that are incredibly profound and useful to the development of a functioning thinking mind. When they're doing that in an environment where that is not happening, they either become arrogant or they become humble. And it's a choice that we each make.
Hmm.
We decide to make it. And I remember at that time when I was in Detroit, I was making the decision to be arrogant a lot. And
Sure.
I didn't like it. I didn't like it.
Hmm.
And I felt like everyone else was okay. It was acceptable to be arrogant in this way. It was
Sure.
considered okay. Um, so yeah. Anyway, that's something I'm pointing out. I feel like I'm trying to say something. I completely forgot what it was. It's a
No, it's a
long ass tangent here, but
it's been a recurrent theme in a lot of my discussions with people. It's like we had these ideals as an organization, and then sometimes, once it got down to that level of like the field office or the individual or groups of people, that we just had these views or ways of action that were like completely inverse to the principles that we were espousing. Cynicism, I mean, from a theological perspective, I could go off on the whole thing, but cynicism theologically is the closest thing I can find to evil, just an evil mindset. And I thank you for saying that thing, that compliment. And like I tried to fight it every chance I could. I tried to be. I mean, optimism was like the whole idea of Leibniz, the theodicy, right? Like making things the best. If this is a universe created in such a way, it's ordered, it's knowable, it's the best of all possible worlds because humans can make it how we wish, right? That's the whole idea. That's where optimism comes from because it's where optimizing, the concept of optimizing, or he just kind of gave it a name, right? And so I remember fighting that everywhere I was, right? You're trying to be like, no, we can accomplish things. And I got the opportunity to be in a lot of different offices, a lot of different points. Sometimes I go back to the same office at different times. I never got to Detroit, but I remember being in offices like, man, this place is like it's too cynical here. It's too like gloom and doom. It's people start like looking inwards in the worst possible way to like look to people to attack and all that, right? And it's awful, and you do find those situations. And some people just have that proclivity, but it would wear on you. So interesting, yeah, that you were able to come out. Do you think that Percival ended up getting to that same point, or maybe thinking about when you ended up leaving, kind of thing? Like, did that come into play, or any thoughts on
well, I
that?
think Percival is a complicated subject because, like I said, when I first came there, I felt like I was like put in a room with me and one other guy, but there were like these two other individuals who had a lot of that energy at that
Yeah,
time. At that time, they had a lot of that
sure,
energy.
sure,
They changed a lot. They changed a lot over the course of you know being there in Percival. Like
sure.
I mentioned, the effect that you had, like the effect that Diana had, the effect that Merv had. Like you needed like a balancing effect. So
Yeah,
it changed. But initially, there was a lot of that energy there when I came there.
sure,
And I was tired of it. Like I just felt exhausted all the time. Like I can't deal with this, like and to be fair, a lot of it was coming from Lynn. Lynn would just call people idiots,
sure.
like I have a whole NEC meeting where he was calling somebody out for being an idiot, and
Yeah,
and it was his organization. We were almost in a way his children. We were copying his behavior. That's
sure.
not to blame him. That's not to blame him. But at the end of the
Mm,
day, arrogance was always an okay option
sure.
because the head of our organization takes that path all the time.
Yeah.
So that's something that I never really liked because I was always keened into the way that Martin Luther King did things.
Hmm.
He was an arrogant, and he was faced with a lot of challenges, a lot of things that were being run against him, operations from the FBI, and all types of stuff that apparently our organization was being challenged with.
Hmm.
But he chose righteousness. He chose that
Sure.
because he didn't put his faith in his mind alone. He put his faith in a higher concept, a higher idea of synchronicity, what we were talking about earlier around Carl Jung and
Yeah.
which basically is the concept of God, and that's a much broader discussion, which is worth discussing as well.
Hmm.
But for now, all I'm trying to say is I was always kind of taken back by the approach that Lynn would have to dealing with
Hmm.
certain situations. He could be at times the most benevolent, loving person. At other times, he could be vile and arrogant, and
Sure.
you never knew which Lynn you were going to get. And at the end of the day, no one was in a position to question which Lynn we got.
Sure.
And some people would choose to copy the benevolent Lynn, and some would choose to copy the arrogant. And all of us, I was sort of wavering in between, but I never felt comfortable with
Sure.
that arrogance. It never felt like me.
Yeah.
And when I first came to Percival, there was a lot of it in the environment, between those individuals that I was working with. And it started to, balance itself out. As I said,
Hmm.
when you and some others came, things started to balance. And I felt like in that environment, um, me personally, I was able to thrive creatively. I did some of the best things that I've done on a creative level in that kind of environment because I realized that my creativity requires the input of completely different minds than mine.
Yeah.
Up until that point, I thought genius was something that happens in a room where the door is closed
Hmm.
and you're just painting and drawing and making music. It's like, no, creativity happens within a cadre, a social dynamic, right?
Hmm.
And we had created that environment in the animation room where we could create things that were well beyond our ability to even imagine to do on our own, and I thought that was amazing. So to this day I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah.
And I, just since the whole time I've been talking to you
Yeah.
as if nobody else is going to listen to this, and I'm sure other people are going to listen to it. And let me just say to the people who are in the organization, I harbor no ill wills to
Yeah.
you. Like,
Yeah.
I have nothing bad to say because these are some of
Sure.
the best people I've ever met in my life.
Sure.
To this day, there are people who are still in the organization who I would gladly invite to my house, who could watch my kids, who would
Yeah.
I would love to like play the piano with and sing. These are the best people I've met in my life.
Hmm.
So I have nothing bad to say about them.
Sure.
And as far as their politics go, I mean, I don't care. I
Yeah.
generally don't care that much about politics now.
Sure.
And it's not because I'm immoral or because whatever, people might think.
Sure.
That's fine. I get it. I just don't care because I have a family,
Sure.
I have aspirations that go beyond, physical, political things. I consider myself a spiritual being having a human experience.
Sure.
And and I think that's something that for me, I was always kind of drawn to ideas that went in that direction,
Hmm.
but it felt like we kind of stopped at a certain point. Like Lynn would talk about book 4 of the Harmonies of the World.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like the book everybody was scared to talk about. It was the book I was the most interested in,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he's talking about it. He's actually talking about it.
Hmm.
The idea that we're a spiritual being having a human experience, that there's more to this experience in the fleshly thing, we have. And Lynn, he had a way of getting at that I thought was profound. I thought was was captivating. But at times I felt like it was and who am I, to question because I don't understand these things as well as some of the people who are probably still in the organization
Hmm.
who could sit me down and show me some stuff that I don't know, and I would, I'm sure they know things, but
Sure.
I've often had the impression that when it came to Lynn's approach, the only path to enlightenment or progress was through the mind.
Hmm.
It was through the mind, and that's a very masculine, approach to wisdom. And I think there's also the spiritual approach.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm using the term spiritual because I'm not trying to make it a religious thing,
Sure.
but there's another path, and I feel like those two can come together.
Hmm.
And at times we got close, but we never quite, did that. So that's the closest thing I have to a critique.
Yeah.
It's not political.
Sure. No,
Not
yeah.
political at all.
Yeah, I think most people I talk to, and like I said, like a lot of people, since I launched this project, a lot of people have reached out to me and it's awesome to reconnect. A lot of people just want to share their thoughts privately, which is cool. Like I like it. I like being that center. And I had this image of like, you ever seen the crepe myrtle trees? it's pretty cool. Like I mean, look them up, crepe myrtle, but like it's all these like different limbs, and the best way to do it is like once a year. Usually it's on Valentine's Day. Like you cut off all the limbs, and but they regrow in like different combinations. So like
Mm,
their trunk is like really complex. It's like this complex of relationships among individuals, you know? So
mm.
it's like, kind of like how you're talking about, no, like I also bear no ill will. I malice towards none, right? Abraham Lincoln. Um, I have no problem with the people that are still doing it. Like, and they know I've said many times, happy to have them on as guests to talk about what they're up to, not as a political platform for them to go up, but they can plug their websites and stuff. They can. I'm more interested in their stories, like as people. Okay, why do you keep doing this? Like that's a cool thing, right? Like that's politics aside, a noble thing for someone to keep sacrificing for your ideals, and that's one of the many nuances of this story overall. It's like it's hard for someone to understand if you see that person on the street corner, you see that person like, man, like you're dedicated, you're giving up a lot. In our case, like you're gonna be poor for a long time. You're not gonna like your friends are gonna think you're crazy. Society's gonna think you're crazy, but like you obviously find some value in it. So like, what is that? And like that's interesting for someone else to understand. But yeah, this is those are good points, man. And this were these all at a certain point you ended up going to Europe.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole nother story too.
Yeah.
That part happened.
I know we got about like 20 minutes left, I think. I want to be respectful of your time. And we can always do a second episode. But
Okay,
yeah.
sure, man. I don't mind talking about it. I just feel I told you this would happen. At some point, I feel like I'm talking too much about me, and I guess that's the
No.
thing.
No, people are going to be interested. I think at this point, people are still like they're going to be bought into your story. I mean, you don't have to talk about it. Whatever you want to talk about. To me, it seemed like you're bringing up some of those deep tensions in a way, and I'm wondering like, did that lead to your departure, or was it other things, or whatever you want to talk about. But
So, yes, in a way that did lead to my departure, but not not the way that it might appear. I would say because it wasn't like I slowly over time came to the conclusion that I don't want to be a part of this, like arrogant, like negative energy. Like I felt
sure,
it a lot, and you feel it everywhere. It's not like the organization is the only place where people are. Obviously, the world is like that, but
sure,
when it was coming from Lynn, it always made it seem like it was okay. You would have, arguments with people about things, and sometimes it would just be kind of like, maybe we should make the video, have Muppets instead of,
sure.
actual people talking or whatever. And then suddenly, oh, I don't think it's a good idea. It needs to be more serious and do this. And well, Lynn said, you're going to
Can I
be, go
can
ahead,
I jump on that?
please.
It's interesting because I was always on the other side of those people. I succumbed to it a couple times, right? Like that feeling, oh, well, someone else, I should do this thing. I should be like critical of this person or like intervene in somebody because that's what I think other people think I should do. But it's to your point, you're describing this process of individuals. It's has a peculiar dissonance when that person who's critiquing you and being cynical or whatever it is, when they, through like a pretty decent level of logic, can say, well, this is what the leader of our organization wants. And it's moral for me in this mindset to apply this cynicism or negativity or whatever it is, right? There's a particular kind of pernicious quality to it when they, to a fair degree, say, I have the moral authority of the leader of our organization to do this awful thing. That's that
Mhm.
all that struck me as well. I think a lot of people like put up with it for a while, and then at a certain point is like, no, this is too much. I don't know. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I just wanted to highlight that. It's like it's hard to say. It's hard to understand. Those people are acting that
Yeah.
way because like, well, our leader has made me believe that it is the most moral thing to do to act this way, right? Not like I'm doing it because I'm a dick. That's a different category.
Right.
So I'm doing this
Right.
because this is the right thing to do.
I mean, the perfect example I'm making this pause intentionally long in case we want to take this out,
Sure.
is the Obama mustache.
Sure.
It's the perfect example of something that we were doing because Lynn said do it.
Sure.
I would argue that the majority of the people did not feel comfortable doing it and they didn't want to do it, but they pretended like they wanted to do it because Lynn said this is what we have to do.
Sure.
And that's not to say that those people who didn't want to do it like secretly agreed with the healthcare policy or whatever we were going against, because obviously we had good reason to criticize it. We obviously did,
Sure.
but that was like a test. It felt like, are you in or out? Are you gonna go out with the mustache or not? Because if you're not, then whoa, Lynn said it. Like, what you don't want? What are you saying? Like, you don't like this anymore? Like, what are you like part of the camp now? You trying to like? It's like, no, no, no.
Sure.
I'm not saying that. I just think like maybe we can like do something else. No, what? Lynn said that. Remember, Lynn said that some people are going to be scared, and like, well, Lynn said some people are going to say maybe this is too much, and those people are fucking idiots or something. I'm
Sure.
exaggerating. I'm
No, no.
exaggerating just for the, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
that to me
But
felt
you're not
like,
you're not exaggerating that much.
yeah, and that felt like, and I remember looking around when that happened, and I think that was the first time where I didn't know where I was anymore.
Yeah. Hmm.
It was the first time I felt like I'm not making decisions about what I'm doing.
Sure.
Somebody else is,
Yeah.
because I don't really like this. I think I mean this feels like a little bit too much. This feels like, you know what I mean. This feels
Yep.
like it's going further than it needs to go.
Hmm.
But guess what I did? Yeah, we should do it. Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. We should have it.
Sure.
I'm gonna
Sure.
go out and organize in DC.
Hmm.
And when you do that, then something happens inside of you.
Yep.
You start to rationalize something that you disagree with on a level that becomes subconscious.
Hmm.
It becomes subconscious. And when it becomes subconscious, it starts to go and you start to have weird dreams. You get like
Sure.
headaches and you got to
Hmm.
go to the doctor. You're feeling sick and like all these things. And it started to feel weird around that time.
Sure.
The subconscious, attempt at trying to justify something that I thought was too far. I thought it was too
Hmm.
far. Created the beginning of a very like physically unhealthy time period, physically,
Sure.
mentally, spiritually, everything.
It's all connected.
Um,
Real quick, just for
so
our
yeah,
audience, sorry, I hate interrupting, but just for our audience that doesn't know, there's a 2009, 2010, Obama came out with a healthcare plan. It was big news, obviously, around the world, especially the US. And our campaign against it, being critical of it, was a famous poster which had President Obama with a Hitler mustache on it. And it was very controversial. I mean, I was hospitalized over like we had a lot. There was the beginning of a lot of physical attacks on us. It was very controversial. Um, a lot of physical attacks. A lot of people sent to the hospital or like attempts at murder. Some of our organizers in LA were like almost run over by cars of people trying to like kill them. A friend got hit by a lead pipe in his head. Like all kinds of stuff, right?
brutal,
And
brutal.
one of my
I didn't know about that pipe
There,
thing.
yeah, it was insane.
Brutal.
I got 11 stitches in my head. Um, yeah, but it was a brutal time period. One of my friends made the point, not for public for his name or whatever, but he said that that might be the greatest contribution the organization did, and this is somewhat negative, right? But that, and I hate that I don't have his direct quote, but it's that we created through that mustache poster a type of radicalization with polemics and arguments in the American political space. And I think he's got a good point that
Wow, I never thought of it that way.
that might be
Wow.
like the greatest contribution. And I think there was certain polarization anyway. I mean, that was like right around the time of the Tea Party and stuff. And I remember like, because I think I was doing stuff in Percival or DC, and then I came back to one of our field offices and like, and we just had got the mustache, and I'm like, what is this? And like, and it's I think it really was a certain kind of trauma for the youth movement of that really how you described it, right? This is what we're doing, and we're not going to really talk about it. We're not, it's not really up for debate. It's either this is the most moral thing we could do because whatever the policy is the same as the Nazis, et cetera, right? Tiergarten, all that stuff, the German zoo and everything, and the murder of the gypsies and the mentally disabled and the in Nazi Germany and such. And it really was like go along. And it's so funny because like Lynn would talk about that, like, oh, the go along to get along mentality. Meanwhile, with this thing, it was like, you're gonna do it. You're gonna do it or pull chocks, get out of here. We don't
Yeah.
want you unless you're prepared to do this thing. And it does have that pernicious pernicious quality. And it's yeah, I think a lot of people kind of that was their first part of their departure, I think, was that one.
There's this movie with Idris Elba. It's called Beasts of No Nation.
Okay.
Have you heard this
I've
movie?
seen the poster. I haven't seen it yet.
I wouldn't advise watching it unless you have very thick skin.
Okay.
And actually, I don't think I would advise anybody to watch it.
Okay.
It's a movie about trauma. It's a movie
Okay.
about trauma, and without like it happens in Africa.
Hmm.
Um, Child soldiers are being taken captive and forced to kill their countrymen just to eat, just to get food,
Wow.
and terrible things are happening. Like these kids are being molested, but there's this scene in the movie. The most terrible thing that happens is one kid, he's an innocent kid. He just, he gets in, he's hungry, he's starving, like his family's killed in front of him. And they won't feed him. They're training him to be a soldier, but they won't feed him. It's like, you want to be a soldier? They give him a gun and they take this guy they're going to kill and they tell him to shoot him.
Hmm.
And all he's thinking is, I've never killed a person. I never killed
Yeah.
him. And he's like, no, that gun's too big. That gun's too big. Give him a knife. Gives him a machete. You got to kill him with the machete.
Jeez.
That moment, when he does that, is the moment he changes radically.
Yeah.
And that analogy is such a hardcore analogy to make to, not even the same.
Sure. I
I would
know.
almost say apples and oranges, but it's like the severity is what's different. The severity of the situation is different.
Sure. The
When
quality's the
somebody
same.
puts that, it's the same. Like, are you going to do this?
Yeah.
And when you do it, you change. And I think that was when I changed. And I didn't know where I was. I didn't really know who I was. I was just trying to suppress this subconscious beast inside of me from like, taking over. And the only way I could suppress it was by doing it more, pretending that
Sure.
I was, of course, we have to do this. And so
Sure.
that's the thing that causes people to need therapy.
Sure.
That's the thing that causes people to have these mental issues where they're like, they don't feel good because cynicism and arrogance is something that we can tolerate, but at some point mentally, our subconscious is going to be like, okay, that's enough. That's enough. That's enough. You've done enough. And the point at which the subconscious says that's enough is different for every person.
Hmm.
Um, but when you do something like that, it's almost like shooting your the angel on your right shoulder. You just shoot him,
Sure.
and
Sure.
you're like, oh, you're done. Now I just got this other thing here, Lynn,
I
basically.
know. There's
Um,
there's a movie that I can recommend people watch with a similar kind of scene. Ken Loach's. It's called The Wind That Shakes the Barley. It's about the Irish Republican Revolution. And there's a scene, they're trying to fight the British Empire. They're trying to create their own nation. There's like noble pursuits in it, right? And it stars Cillian Murphy, um, who just happened to live in the area. Like the director only filmed people. He only took actors from the region itself, and Cillian Murphy just happened to live there, which is kind of funny.
um,
But there's a scene where this kid named Chris Riley who like he's kind of forced to sell out people that he worked with as being members of the Republican Revolution. And so the leaders, including Cillian Murphy, they morally have to now kill this kid. And it's just this devastating scene where they take him out of this field and like and he knows the kid and he's like I don't know like 14-year-old boy farmhand who was just trying to like he was pressured and he was he was forced to do something he didn't want to that was against the aims of the revolution. And so Killian Murphy has to go take him out in the field and shoot him, and the kid's like, please don't. Like, is there some other way? And like you could tell there's this feeling like I have to do it for this greater goal. And just it breaks your heart. It's such a heartbreaking scene. So that might be something, people can watch that one, I guess,
Yeah,
but not to
I
make
don't
it too
know. I
light. But
wouldn't advise people
yeah,
personally to watch it unless you're ready to go to therapy because
sure,
really like what we experienced was traumatic because what you think about these people who get therapy, they're not getting therapy for what they saw or what happened to them. They're getting therapy for what they did. I
sure,
killed a man. Turns
sure,
out, he didn't have a gun. I thought he had a gun. All these people coming back from wars, they're getting therapy for what they did.
sure.
And
Well,
there's a lot of there's
a lot of people get therapy for stuff that did happen to them too. Like in fairness, like they were
yeah,
assaulted or something, right? So not that
that's true.
anyone
Yeah.
is going to be critical, but that's no, I was expecting that at some point the mustache is going to come up, um, and for sure, and I just kind of wanted to come up naturally as it did. But I think that's a good context for it. It was one of those things. There's another movie called The Master. I think I brought it up in a previous episode. Paul Thomas Anderson, the guy that did Boogie Nights and Magnolia and There Will Be Blood. Uh,
Oh
it's
yeah, he's
yeah,
good.
he's great.
Oh wait, I think I know this movie.
Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's it's kind of like a parody of the Scientology dude, um,
Yeah.
whatever, L. Ron Hubbard. But there's a scene where, and he's the great intellectual writing all these books, and everyone's following him. And Laura Dern plays one of his like main acolytes, one of his main supporters, and like he just writes this new book, and she comes out and she's like so excited to read the new ideas, and like she approaches him like, "Hey, wait a minute, like you wrote this thing, but it's entirely opposite to everything that you wrote before." And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, whatever." And doesn't it's a great little scene. Just that dissonance of like, "Oh, wait, what are we doing now? Like we're doing this? Like this isn't what I joined, but like I'm with this group and it's the moral thing. And like if I don't do this, if I don't just follow 100%, then I'm now immoral and like I'm the worst, Like and I don't care about mankind anymore because I have a disagreement on this. But it was just like this monolithic, like, nope, this is not up for debate. We're doing it. And
Yeah.
people like lean like, no, this is the greatest. Like we're making it's brilliant. I had organizers, I knew organizers that just that they want to go out with just the mustache and nothing else. It's like this is it. This is who we are now, right? Who cares about development projects, the Eurasian Land Bridge, NWAPA, whatever credit system? No, this is us. We're doing it. We're attacking this thing, and that's it. And it's wild. It was wild.
It came up, it had to, because it's part of the history.
Yeah,
And despite that, my time in the organization was, for the most part, like the best years of my life,
yeah.
And everything leading up to that transition felt like it was going in one direction, and that happened, and it went somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And despite that, we made some great content. We worked on some ideas, and to quote the great and honorable Tristan. What's your friend's name again?
Tristan.
Uh, Tristan.
Yeah.
If you build 100 bridges and suck one dick, you're a dick sucker. You know what I mean? So it's like that had me on the floor. I swear to God. I was dead. I was dead.
That's really, I know.
Minister Tristan, to quote the honorable minister.
I know.
Yeah, man. It feels like it's hard to look past those things that we did sometimes
Sure.
because you did all these amazing things and you're a better person because of what you did. But then there's that one time you did this one thing. I think about when Brian was leaving,
Yeah.
Brian McAndrews. Uh, Man, that guy had such a rough life. He had this daughter. I remember her running around the office. He would bring her sometimes and he would drive all the way back to Philly to be with her
Yeah.
for half the week and he would come back.
Yeah.
and everybody was giving him such a hard time in the office.
Sure.
Everybody's giving him a hard time, like, oh, he's got a kid, he's not really a member. And he was like, and Brian was like, he was a tough guy. He wasn't a
Sure.
pushover.
Sure.
He'll put up with a little bit of, people like, we'd have these meetings and everybody would give their input. And whenever Brian would, mention stuff, people would get up and go get a coffee, or like somebody would start talking to somebody else about it. And it's like almost like, it doesn't really matter. It's just Brian. He's just here
Damn.
because, I
Sure.
remember that. I remember that very clearly, that energy.
Wow.
And I remember when he came there, like, I remember having this feeling of relief because here's somebody that I don't have to like pretend around. You know what I
Sure.
mean? Like, he's an artist. We can just talk about art. We spent a lot of time just talking about art.
Yeah.
We make these animations together. It was an amazing experience having him. And he was always like lifting me up. It was weird. He's like, man, you're such a good artist, man. I wish I could draw as good as you. And like, Brian, like, I'm
Yeah.
learning from you how to do this stuff. Like, he made the animation desk he made it.
Yeah.
He found a blueprint for it, and I still want to get that. I want to go to America and find that. I don't care if it's in a dumpster. I want to get that damn animation desk.
Yeah.
But he made that. He made it for me. He said
Wow.
Chance needs an animation desk. He didn't make one for himself. He said Chance needs one. He was always
Wow.
pushing me up. And I remember Brian. I probably need therapy for this because I realized like there's some suppressed, but just with Brian,
Sure. Yeah.
because he
Yeah.
was like such a golden soul.
He was such a beautiful
Um,
man. Such a
he
beautiful
was.
heart. Like
Tell me about him. Tell me what you know about him, because
you know what, and I was thinking about this with Joanne because I didn't have too many interactions with him, but like every single one was like, this dude is just amazing. Like, you can just tell. There's just this aura about him. He always had that smile. He just had that's a genuine smile. This dude is just so full of love. Yeah, he had that toughness to him. He was just funny and humble, and you're like, man, this art. It's such a nuanced story. This organization was full of people, of great people, but then you have those people that like him, like, man, this dude. And yeah, it's sad, you know, what happened and everything. But yeah, those people that inspire you, like, what is it, a decade later, and he's still making us happy. He's still just bringing joy into the world. And
great man right there. It's a good man.
yeah,
So yeah, man. I was about to say something, but I realized like I'm coughing a lot more because I feel like I might start crying thinking about him because I don't mind. I don't mind.
sure, yeah,
I went to ayahuasca ceremonies. You just cry the whole time for like 4 hours, just crying. And it's not because of sad stuff. It's just you just feel so much love.
sure,
And I remember um I'm not gonna say names, but I was having like a dispute with somebody
uh-huh,
about some video I wanted to make, some little animated video.
mm-hmm,
And this person was like, well, that's not, political. That's just like, like what's the political part of it? Like
sure,
that's
sure,
just like stupid. Um, and I remember Brian, he stepped in and he said something like, well, is Alice in Wonderland political? Is it stupid? Like, where's the politics in Alice in Wonderland? Lynn keeps talking about Lewis Carroll. Like,
sure,
doesn't have to be overt. Like, he like posed this question, and the person's like, yeah, whatever, Brian. Like, Brian. Like, what he like? They kind of like dismissed him. And I
sure,
remember he was like, hey, you don't talk to me like that. You don't talk to me. He said that to that person. You don't talk to me like that.
nice,
And it was almost like splashing cold water on something. I was like, whoa. It's like, no, you don't talk to me like that. And he looked
yeah,
at him, and they were looking at him, and they were like, yeah, okay. And they kind of left. And they didn't give me shit about the video. We worked on that video together. It was
sure,
cool. It was
yeah,
cool. And I remember that, like, he would do that a lot. Like, he would stand up. He would stand up against that arrogance.
mm-hmm,
He didn't like it, but he was like, he didn't put up with it though.
yeah, yeah,
I felt like I put up with it a lot. He didn't put up with that shit.
yeah,
And I remember he decided to leave. He had to. He had a kid. The fact that he
yeah,
was there in the first place was crazy. Um, and I didn't want him to leave, man, because I felt like if he left, like I would be by myself. That's what I felt like. I would be
Yeah.
by myself.
Hmm.
There's nobody else here who really wants to like do art. Like everybody's trying to like make everything like overly political, like overt.
Yeah.
You know, there's like no art.
Hmm.
And I was explaining it to him, and he's like, "Man, I gotta go. My daughter, you know, and plus, you know, this Hitler mustache stuff. I don't really like that, man. I can't really do that."
Sure.
And I was like, "Yeah, but I mean, you don't have to organize, man. Like, it's like, nah, you know." He kind of had this thing, and I was like, "But Brian, if you leave, man, think about what Lynn's trying to do. Like, if you leave, you know, there's not gonna be like, we're not gonna succeed. We need you here."
Yeah.
And he was like, I gotta go. And I was like, Brian, man, like you're turning out, you know, I don't remember what I said, but I kind of like I gave him a hard time about it. You know, I gave him a
Sure.
hard time. And he didn't break. He was so calm with me. He was like, I gotta go, man. I gotta go.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, man. I don't even think I gave him a hug or anything. I just said, all right, man, I left.
Yeah.
That was the second strike. It was the second strike where I did something that I knew, you know what I mean? It's like the
Sure.
second time I did something like that.
Yeah.
We ended up connecting, you know, before what happened to him, and we had, you know, some really good conversations. Really amazing. I've kept all his voicemails he left me too. I listen to him at least once a year.
Nice.
Um, and so then I think the third strike for me was Sky. What happened to Sky?
Sure.
That was the third strike. And what happened with Sky was like a long time coming. Like that was like there's a lot leading up to it, you know?
Sure.
So after Brian left, Sky was the person I kind of like was able to like, you know, reside in a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it was a bit more difficult with other people because you know there was this period in Percival where things got weird.
Sure.
You know what I'm talking
So
about.
I was there.
And for the sake of time,
Yeah.
for the sake of time, I'm not going to get into it. You know, I'm not
Yeah.
trying to get into it. It just it happened. You know, it was weird. Um, and I noticed like that thing. You know how you get these groups.
Hmm.
The groups got smaller and more fragmented and further away.
Sure.
And I just remember feeling alone a lot. Like, you know, at that point I was single.
Hmm.
Most people at least had like somebody they could like nobody really trusted each other. You know, couples would kind of keep to themselves and you
Sure.
know, people weren't really hanging out. You know, a lot of people going to bars a lot, like a lot of time spending in bars suddenly, like drinking and
Yeah.
like which to me was like I want to go to a bar and get drunk. Like this, why don't
Sure.
we like do what we used to do? And like like a lot of cynicism, but in a weird way.
Sure.
And then there was this memo about Sky basically being kicked out or he left or he made a what was how did that happen again? I forgot. Did Sky leave and then he wrote a memo or did we write a memo? I can't remember.
A lot of the basement people left at a certain short period of time, and they wrote a big document that they sent out to the membership. Um, and I won't say the name just out of respect in case they don't want it out there. But that they detail it was a long article, and they detailed their reasons for why they left. And it had a lot of salacious um, details and things in there. So just leave it at that. But yeah, and then of course then there was the predictable response from the organization, right? Like attacking those people. I don't even remember what the attacks were. I just remember like it's predictable. You know, you could write on a script. Oh, they're agents of foreign influence. They're morally or psychologically corrupt. I mentioned in the episode with Tristan that the one dude, the poor kid who joined and then like ended up helping write an article, and then we dime out his porn habits and like, geez, like it's just
I don't remember that, but that was hilarious. I was on the floor. I was on the floor when you
I
said that.
forgot
That's
about it. Like, oh my
hilarious.
God, like it's just God, there's just nothing sacred to a lot of those people. But yeah,
But Sky sent me a text message one night, and it was pretty short. He just said, "Don't believe anything they say about me. Um, it's not true."
sure.
And he said, "I'll be in touch." He just said, "I'll be in touch."
Uh-huh.
And at that point, it had just started something about Sky. Like it was just like suddenly, like Sky left.
Sure.
Nobody said anything. It was like literally like, and then maybe like that evening, I got a text message from Sky. I was like, what? Sky was the organization. He was the organization. Lyndon
Sure.
Sky, that was the organization.
Hmm.
That's like almost like Lynn leaving. Like Sky leaving was
Sure.
like a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Can you imagine if Lynn quit?
yeah, I know. Like, what are we gonna do? Like, what? Sky was like that on that level, and he was like a really good person. I love talking to him. Like he was just like
Sure.
level headed. Everybody thinks the same thing about him. Like nobody could say anything bad about him.
Sure.
And it was weird. It was so weird that suddenly everybody had all these bad things to say about him. Like suddenly.
Sure.
And I remember this meeting where came in and basically told us that there was this operation being run against us, and she said the predictable stuff and all this other kind of thing. And she said, if Sky tries to reach out to you, don't respond to him. Let us know. Third strike
Yep.
for me. Third strike
Sure.
was me after that meeting giving her my phone and saying, Sky sent me a text message.
Sure.
That was my third strike. All three of those strikes was like me feeling like shit.
Sure.
I felt like shit doing something I knew I shouldn't have do. That was my third strike right there.
Hmm.
And I don't think I really recovered from that third strike. And I was gonna leave. But by then I had been in the organization for a long time. My family didn't know me. I didn't know them. What you talked about in the other episode,
Yeah.
none of my friends except one were even like in contact with me. It's like, what am I gonna do now? I
Sure.
didn't know what that meant. And more than that, like I still got friends who are here.
Sure.
I don't want to leave them.
Sure.
Like I don't want to leave these people by themselves. Like it was like I don't want to leave them. Like
Sure. Feel
this
like we're
is
letting
family. Like
letting them down too, you know?
yeah,
There's like it's such a complex emotion.
isn't it?
Hmm.
Isn't it?
Hmm.
So and then Helga came
Uh-huh.
and she brought Kasha second time, third time, whatever she came,
Hmm.
and I fell in love with Kasha, like
Hmm.
genuinely, and I wasn't even trying to, like really, because like
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't. We got this thing about not talking to the women. You remember that? When
Sure.
do you
Yeah.
remember that? Actually, like
There's a lot of those things. It was, yeah.
there's some weird shit. Like
Yeah,
none of
it's
the guys talk to the women, right?
sure.
From Europe when they come,
Yeah.
right? And I thought that was the weirdest shit. But by then there was so much weird stuff happening. It wasn't even the weirdest. It wasn't the weirdest of the weirdest stuff happening. So it was just
Yeah.
like, all
Whatever.
right, whatever, whatever. And so whenever like these girls from security would come, I would like turn my head and like
Look.
do something else. They thought we were fucking weird, man.
I
Like
know.
I remember Petra
Yeah.
said that she didn't understand like why none of the Americans wanted to talk to her. Like
Uh,
she thought like we were all just like arrogant and like kind of like mean and whatnot. And her boyfriend gave me a call. Who amazing musician, love the guy. Didn't really get to meet him. Super talented, like one of the many. He was really super talented.
yeah.
Gave me a call. He was like, "Hey, can you talk to her because like she's feeling pretty bad. Nobody's talking to her." And I think I just said hi to her and like, "Hey, what do what is it like? Where you're from?" And she just started talking. I was like our best friend. We were talking all the time.
Yeah.
Turns out she was super cool. She just had a lot. She was so happy to be in America,
Yeah.
and we clicked. Her
Yeah.
boyfriend was super cool. Like I would talk to him. Like yes, she seems to be doing better. And I didn't realize it, but she was telling Kasha about me before Kasha came. Like you got to talk
Okay.
to Chance because
Nice.
he's the only one who's not weird.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it, but we were just literally told not to talk to you. And there was
Sure.
a lot of weird stuff going on too.
Sure.
So when Kasha came, I was just like, hey, I'm just kind of talking to her, and we clicked. We read a lot of Schiller,
Hmm.
and she was, you know,
They used to be the joke of like, oh, we're gonna go and read some Schiller. That's how like,
I found out about that joke later because I didn't
yeah.
know that was a joke. I wasn't in
That's
the.
early days at LA. I was like, oh yeah, me and this girl, we're gonna go read some Schiller at my place. She's like, okay. And like that legit like that's how it started, you know. That's like, oh sure, okay. There's a sequence of events are about to go down.
I think everybody knew it except me because by then I felt like I had given up. Like it was so weird, that time period. Like and a big part of being in the organization, if you were single, is that you were most likely going to be single the whole time you were in the organization. That was another
Sure.
part of it.
Sure.
There was a very disproportionate amount of men and women in the organization,
And it's frowned
and that's
upon.
fine.
It was frowned upon to date outside of the organization as
It was
well.
frowned upon to date
Hmm.
outside the organization, so you
Hmm.
kind of just like, you
Some
know,
people made a whole hobby of dating contacts. That's like a whole
oh
thing.
yeah,
Yeah. Not me, other people, but sure. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
No, I never got around to being in that position to even do that. So,
Sure. Yeah.
but it became like a way for me to recover a bit from those three strikes
Sure.
was being with her. Like it really was like the work that we were doing. And she knew I was in a tough spot. Like she knew, everybody was in a tough spot,
And
but she wasn't judgmental,
she's such a great person, you
she
know.
is.
Like she's an amazing person. And that's awesome that you had that, you know. A lot of people don't have that. A lot of people just I don't know, they go there's all kinds of paths, but they just maybe hunker down like, all right, just this is my life now, you know, like there's no other path for me. I'll just keep going, you know.
Yeah. And I want to say I would have left, but the truth is, I don't know. I probably would still be hunkered down. I don't know. I really don't,
Sure.
But thank
Sure.
God I met Kasha because I had the opportunity to leave while not necessarily having to leave, I just went
Sure.
to the German organization basically.
Sure.
Uh, and if anybody's interested in that part of the story, then I suppose maybe we can do another one at some point if you want to
Sure.
do it, because that's like a
No.
whole thing. Like it would be
Sure.
just as long as this one, like
No,
the
I love
German
it.
organization.
I
Like,
was saying before we recorded for our audience, I told Chance like, man, I didn't even think to invite both you and your wife on because that would have been awesome too. But no, like I mean, put in the comments or email me at this email here. Um, you know, if you'd like to see, I'm sure people would love to see it. Either her or another one with you or both of you. I mean, whatever. Like the audience is there, so absolutely, it'd be awesome.
who is the? I mean, I guess I asked that afterwards because I don't know. I'm just talking to you, Spencer, and I have like a vague idea of maybe some members who are listening and maybe some ex-members and
I think it's a.
like,
I don't really
I guess
know.
it's members and ex-members basically.
Yeah, yeah. I have
Yeah.
guesses. There is a lot of interest from ex-members in this project. I'll tell you that. And I'm glad because I think we broached some topics here that are like, you know, like they were going to happen. Like, the mustache discussion, and I'm sure it'll happen more, which is cool. So it's more like broaching it and like people seeing that I'm a fair person and all that, and that they're not going to be whatever. I'm going to treat them fairly, right? And we're not going to dime out individuals. But I think the audience is probably like half just people that have no clue about who this organization was at all. And
Oh,
then
really?
I think
Because I haven't been
so.
talking to them at all. Like I'm just
Yeah.
talking as
No,
if
no,
they
it's
understand everything.
I know there's some jargon here. You're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
One of my friends wrote this list of like almost like a glossary of terms that like would make no sense to people. Like what, you know, field deployment, table, a lunge,
Yeah.
what's an NEC? Like all like these things like no one's gonna know
Even
those terms.
Schiller, like even if you Googled who he was, it still wouldn't quite make sense, Like
Sure.
it's
Yeah, yeah.
like, what do you
And
mean you were reading Schiller, Like
sure. Yeah, so definitely ex-members, current members are watching it, I know, for sure. Like a lot of people have reached out, from all walks, and I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't sure launching this thing. Like, I don't know, am I just digging up old stuff? Like, you know, thinking through my own motivations, like, why am I doing this? But after launching it, it's been like nothing but confirmations that it was the right choice, and that it is going to be a useful project. So yeah, hopefully encourages others. But yeah,
can I reiterate the point I made in the beginning about you being the right person for this?
sure,
Because, and I know
yeah,
you don't, you whatever, you take it.
yeah,
Compliments, take them.
sure, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll take him. I'll take him.
Receive it, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
But like the thing that I realize is whenever I'm talking to someone who wasn't in the organization at all, and they asked me, "So what? Where do you come from? What do you do?" Like the question I get asked a lot in Germany is, "Why did you come to Germany?"
Hmm.
Like Germans ask me that all the time. Like, warum bist du hier? Nicht in
Yeah,
Amerika. Why are you in Germany? Not in America is so much better. Now it's different because the main question people ask me is like, who did you vote for? That's the question every German asks Americans now. Who'd you vote
sure.
for? Who'd you vote for? It's like, man, are you a therapist? Because I don't want to talk to you unless you're a therapist about that. Okay, I'm tired of like having these discussions with Germans who don't understand the nuance. But so what I'm trying to say is that whenever I try to talk to people who are not members about the organization, there's a feeling I have that on the one side, I don't think they're ready to hear this story because I don't even know if I have enough time to tell this
Sure.
story. You know,
Hmm.
I just met you.
Hmm.
And then the other thing I think is, oh, they won't understand. They won't understand.
Hmm.
And it's the same feeling I got when you and Tristan were reading the Wikipedia page. It's like, there's no way anybody can understand what that organization is from any attempt at summarizing it in less than, 3 or 4 hours over a beer, like
Yeah.
there's no way to even begin to make sense of it.
Hmm.
So there's that. Like, I'm just reluctant to talk to people about it because of those two, points.
Sure.
But then there's also like talking to ex members. Like, what kind of ex member am I talking to? Because we're not all the same,
Sure.
Some are very hostile,
Sure.
and some are like still, reading briefings and going to meetings and stuff. And even though they're like two opposite extremes, they're both kind of extremes, and I have difficulty talking with either of those extremes about the experience because you know I don't genuinely harbor ill will
Yeah.
to the organization, to the people who are in it. And at the same time, like, I am not going to a meeting.
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to you about why we should, elect Trump or do whatever you want to do, And it's not because I'm opposed to all this stuff. It's just politics in any extreme becomes insanity. Like, I don't want to have a discussion with an extremist about politics.
I mentioned it a
Don't
little
want
bit.
to do that.
I mentioned a little bit in the first episode. I tried to go to a meeting and they told me that I wasn't moral enough.
That is so wild to me. Like, they would tell you, like, maybe they could tell, I don't know, like me
What?
after this episode, but like,
No. That's still that's a hard line and that's just right. It broke off into two, right? That was just one of the groups.
sure, right.
And I have not dimed out that person by name. It would be very easy for me to do that, but that's just to make the point. Like I'm not trying to
I mean,
dime
it's
people
it's
out.
a testament of who you are and why it's so good that you're doing this.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. No, I agree. It's an immensely complex story. I thought like this is really just a specific form of miniseries, right? We all have these like thematic episodes. Like this one is like you and your experience, and it's been a total pleasure for sure. But it's this could be 300 episodes, to cover. Like not who knows who wants to contribute, but it's that's how long the story is. And I like initially I hadn't even planned on like free LYM stuff, free youth movement stuff, but I realized like that's in play too because that's part of the history and like if people want to come on and talk about that, like we did some amazing things, like there's it's such nuance and it's you do have elements of trauma and discord and like people acting shitty to other people and like we all have like different aspects of participating in that, and I've tried to reach out over the years to the people I thought I wronged to try and like get some kind of closure, and I feel like I've done a pretty good job of that. That's part of it too, because part of it's like people had trauma and like I know people that I'm still in touch with for just general reasons that like they don't want to talk about the movement at all. They don't even want to talk about it, and we're just we have a relationship based on other things. And some people are like fearful. Some people are too fearful to come on camera to say anything, right? Because they fear the organization or they fear their own careers, or there's all kinds of reasons, but you still have people like that too. So, and then just people that haven't been able to process and contextualize and, how they were treated, and kind of like you were describing, the view of Sky, right? Like Sky leaves. And this guy, for people, obviously for our general audience, Sky, phenomenal human being, great dude. Um, he was seen as like kind of the person that probably was going to take over from Lynn, which is like one of the most brilliant people you'll ever meet in your life. Super talented, universally loved. Um, just such a great dude. And then he leaves, and then we're told, oh no, he actually was awful. He actually was, working for whatever. It's like a Mad Libs of like pick your intelligence organization. He's an agent of Russia or China or what Iraq. He's a whatever it was. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. But you just have that kind of attack on person, and then like you're a member and like, well, man, what's gonna happen when I leave? What are they gonna say about me? And so you create that wall, that outward facing wall. Like, okay, I can't jump over that fence because one, it's nothing but beasts and barbarians on the other side. Society's evil and corrupt, yada yada. But also, I'm not maybe not in touch with my friends, maybe not in touch with my family, maybe I don't have any way to survive for more than a week, if I leave, this kind of thing. So there's that issue as well. So yeah. Um,
I'm glad to talk to you about it, man. I really am.
Thanks,
It's
man.
it's actually healthy,
Hmm.
because it's nobody can spend, a good 10, 12 years of their life doing something that they were passionate about,
Yep.
full of like deep, strong connections, friendships that
Hmm.
would normally last a lifetime, normally in any other circumstance.
Sure.
Suddenly it ends and you lose contact with everyone.
Sure.
And you
All
can't talk about it. You can't
sure.
talk about it because nobody's going to understand it.
Your
That
family,
alone
yeah,
warrants therapy. It's not like, because it was a cult or something. It's just that alone, just that.
sure.
Take it from that standpoint. Like, and so when I'm able to talk to someone like you, who's very, impartial to the experience, like you don't harbor ill will, but you're
Yeah.
not like, I'm gonna go out and, be a big time, even if you were curious about it, like you're very open about your experience,
Yeah.
and it's important. It's important to talk about it, and it's not that many people that I can talk to about this.
Thank you, man. Yeah.
Really not.
It's worth noting too, like when people leave, obviously their family, maybe they have some idea, but no one really understands what a lot of us went through. Like they would try, your family can be loving, but like they just don't get it. Like they don't get it because they don't get the mindset, and they'll be compassionate stuff. Friends, same thing. And then at the same time, you can't reach out because of this moral orthodoxy. You can't reach back into the organization to talk to them because a lot of times they're told, like, do not talk to this person. They're verboten, right? They're an agent provocateur or whatever. All this like old school remnants of communist garbage, right? So like, and then you're not maybe sure about all the other ex-members because you spent years hearing all this horrible stuff, and maybe you lost. So like, you're like left to just you you're like detached to go float into space, and you don't know if you're ever going to reach another planet. You just And so that's part of the value of a discussion like this because other people, and I've got good feedback on that level too, like other people reaching out saying, oh, like, what this person said was really useful. I didn't realize this person thought that. And just like connecting, just kind of opening it up in a public sphere, I think it's just air it out. We could talk about it, and then yeah, I think it's good. It's healthy.
One other thing I will say, because I
Hmm.
feel like we keep wrapping it up, and I enjoy talking to you so much. I
Yeah.
really do. I don't want it to end, but I have to do stuff, and I'm sure
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
to start your day. But when I finally decided to leave, I'm not gonna, make a big deal about that story because that, we can make another episode on that. But
Sure.
I decided I wanted to do art. I didn't know what that meant because I have only been doing art for the organization. I didn't know what prices were. I didn't know how to do anything. Uh, the first two people I worked with were ex-members.
Hmm.
Chris Yaddis was the first one who reached out to me.
Nice.
I love that dude. That's my brother. Chris
Hmm.
Yaddis reached out to me. He was like, I want you to do a caricature of me and my fiance.
Nice.
And I knew he really wanted me to. I knew it because he really wanted that for me.
Yeah.
And I told him my price. He was like, that's too little. I'm going to give you a little bit more because he was like trying to educate me at the same time. And
Yeah.
then you reached out to me. You reached
Hmm.
out to me
Hmm.
to do these pins, the
Hmm.
Navy pins.
Hmm.
And I
I
was I was so grateful for the two of you. Like
That's awesome. I meant to say in the intro, Chance, you're actually somewhat famous in the Navy community for those pins. I mean, I've sold a lot of those pins. Yeah, I reached out to Chance for this product I make. It's called the Beer Swass and the Swole Swass. But no, it's cool too. We're talking about Brian having that same sort of lasting effect. It's still making us happy and making us cry a little bit. But you and I are still bringing joy into the world together.
that's
Because I never thought
that's amazing,
I
man.
never thought I'd be a businessman, but I just kind of like fell backwards into this little company I started with a couple of friends, and I just kind of kept doing it myself. But I always thought like business kind of like dirty, like sales and stuff, like oh you're just trying to make money. But like every week I get reviews on my Etsy store and stuff saying like I love this product. You made my sailors so happy. This
Wow.
is this is the greatest thing. Thank you so much for doing this. Like this is so cool. Like this is the coolest thing I've seen in the Navy. Like just it's all positivity, like just from this idea. And you helped bring in it. You really the design was you, but in both pans. And it's like it's great. It's a great thing. So it's a good example for ex-members. Like hey, no reason you can't work with people, and no reason you can't still bring joy into this world.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Hmm. Yeah, I know. I do want to be respectful of your time. How much? I think we've gone over like 30 minutes for how long you said we had.
Yeah, we went over a little bit. I don't care, but
Okay.
yeah, I should be going soon. We
Okay.
did go over a little bit.
No, my audience, put in the comments if you want to see another episode of this of Chance, or if you want to see. I don't know. I don't want to like uh, volunteer you guys, but I think a couple episode, Chance and Kasha could be an awesome episode if you guys could make the
She,
time.
I think she would like that. I know
Okay.
she would definitely like one by herself. I think she would like it. She would just make fun of me the whole time. It's really
Sure.
funny.
No, no pressure. I would love it. I think our audience would love it too. Either way, whatever you guys want to do, I would love to do it again. It'd be awesome. Because yeah, I think the Europe story is a good story we have not told yet. There's just so much there, and Kasha is such a cool, amazing person that I think I would love to hear what she thinks. So, um, yeah, I'll try to round out now because I want to be respectful. But man, Chance, it's been awesome. I'm so glad we've continued as friends. I value you deeply as a human being, as just a thoughtful person, a loving, creative person who's trying to bring beauty and love into the world. I think anyone that's met you knows that. And thank you so much for your honesty here and your vulnerability. It's beautiful, and I can tell you it will inspire others. People are going to see it, and they'll yeah, it's a great story. So thank you so much,
I
man.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
What you see is what you get every time you look for a question.
Careful else you may forget if often you can see reality.
What I see,
Now I see